All right. So today I want to talk about our calling from God. And initially, or most generally, the first call that we all receive from God is the call to holiness. And that call is for each and every one of us, regardless of our state in life. We are all called to that holiness that leads to entrance into heaven. And the word we're often hear when we talk about is vocations, and that vocation, the word vocation comes from the word vocare in Latin, which means to call. So that is, when we talk about vocations, we're talking about a calling from God. Hence why I began with that call, general call that we all have to holiness. But we all have received also a vocation, a calling to a particular state in life, and that varies, obviously, from person to person. We have received a call to priesthood, religious life, married life, or single life. Those are all special callings by God individually for each one of us. So, but even within that call to a specific state of life, God calls us even in other ways as well. So we're used to talking about discerning a vocation, meaning more the vocation of life, that state of life which God calls us to. But there are other vocations, other callings that God has for each of us, and those vary quite a bit, because God sometimes calls some people to a particular career even. Maybe it's a particular field of nursing or teaching or other things. Those can be specifically calls from God as well, and how we live out our state in life. He also calls us to different ministries as we live out our life, live out our state in life, and even a career that may be a calling from God, that he calls us to specific ministries, ministries in the church, and could even be ministries that aren't directly in the church, calling to minister to those in difficult pregnancies, or in the pro-life movement, which may or may not be directly through the church, but certainly may be a calling that God has made for us individually. So when we talk about this call from God, there are, in general, going back to the universal call to holiness, obviously that one we're called to holiness, called to salvation, and that is directed for us individually. But our other callings are both for our own salvation, but also for the salvation of others. And it may be even more primarily focused on the salvation of others. So think about the priesthood. That is certainly my calling from God, and he has called me to that, to live my faith and to gain salvation through that. But that is also most obviously a way for me to help others in their own vocations, their own callings, their own salvation. And married life, obviously that is how a particular individual will move to gain salvation. But one goal of marriage is to help their spouse and children get to heaven as well. So it is not only inward, but these callings from God are also outward. And some may be specifically a calling for serving others and helping them in their salvation. So each of these calls from different callings from God are important in our lives, important in the lives of the church, important in the lives of those that we interact with. And part of that is also, so the Curcio movement may also be a calling that people are called to serve the Curcio movement, to serve God in that fashion. Certainly that's clear in those that are working in the Secretariat and other leadership within the Curcio movement. Those are obviously could be seen easily as God calling people to serve in that way. But we're all called to live out our Curcio. So in some ways that we've are a part of the Curcio movement, we are all have a similar calling and living the Curcio in our lives. So let us try to make that a reality in our own lives as we follow the Curcio method and seek to be a part of Curcio in a greater way. And again, that Curcio is certainly the 3-day Curcio could be an important part of our salvation, the 4th day as well, but should not only be for our own benefit, it should be for the benefit of others, the benefit of the church as a whole, as we seek to make friends, be friends, and bring friends to Christ. So in that way, we are certainly all leaders in Curcio leaders, and which is a call from God. So, and there are certainly different ways we serve Curcio. Some, as I said, are more directly, more grandly seen as callings from God and being a part of Secretariat, School of Leaders, but other ways, certainly being on team is a call from God. And I think in these last couple Curcios especially, the 3-day weekends, that we've maybe seen that more clearly in how those weekends unfolded, especially during the coronavirus time here, as people that initially intended to be a part of the weekend were not there, and others that were initially not part of the team joined and participated. We certainly can see God's hand in all of that as we have looked back at those weekends, seeing God working through those individuals. So God is a part of all of this. God is a part of our life, and He calls us to Himself and calls us to service in the church and outside the church. So let us certainly take stock of our own call from God and say we may have been a different point in our life when we married, when we were living out our life, and maybe we didn't see some of these things as calls from God in particular, but they are. God is a part of all of it, even if we weren't focused on that as much as we could have been. So even our beginnings of Curcio, maybe we went simply to placate the person that was asking us, but God had a hand in that. God had a hand in you saying yes to that call through another person. So our calls from God in a variety of ways they're from Him. So don't forget that, even if maybe we weren't recognizing it at the time. God's hand is always involved in things that lead to Him. So let us thank God for the gifts He gives us, the gift He has given us through the Curcio movement, and let us strive to continue to discern his call in our life, because maybe for a time we are called to one ministry, one apostolate, but sometimes that changes. So to be aware of that and to be willing to be open to God's call, the God's prompting, and how we live that call. So let us strive for that openness of heart that maybe began at our 3-day Cursillo. That Spirit still moves, that Spirit still changes, leading us to Him, leading us to service in the church, to service in Cursillo. De Chloris.
My name is John Ameis. I made Cursillo number 53. I sat at the table of St. Blaise and I worship Our Lady of Grace in Noblesville. Michael asked me to share some thoughts about group reunions, specifically the leaders group reunion. And I wanted to focus maybe a little bit on the why of group reunions as we share some thoughts. I want to remind you that the Holy Spirit is present. I've asked Him to be with us, and I know that He is. So let's begin by reflecting about the current situation around the globe and here in the United States. Many people, men, women, and children everywhere, are desperate for Jesus Christ, and they don't even know it. They have no idea that He needs to be a part of their life. They are angry, afraid, and insecure. Many for the first time in their lives in this country. I know for me, I noticed a big change around 2001 during 9/11. They are desperate for compassion, for true love, security, dignity, self-worth, to feel valuable as a human being, to see themselves as a child of God. Many experience violence daily, gun violence, slavery, abuses of all sorts, hatred, discrimination, anger, you name it. They are desperate for a home. They are in desperate need of hope. So why did the Holy Spirit inspire the creation of the Cursillo movement and method anyway? I find some help with Matthew 9:35-37, where He said, Jesus went around to all the towns, teaching and proclaiming the gospel, curing disease, and illnesses of all sorts. His heart was moved with pity. The people were troubled and abandoned. They were without a shepherd. Then He said, the harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few. And then John, in chapter 19, verse 28, said, I thirst. His thirst needs to be satiated. Jesus needs laborers. He needs disciples. That's why Cursillo may have been created, or at least one of the reasons. Mother Teresa said in 1981, to show forth the luminous face of Jesus, radiant with purity, radiant. That's why. So next slide, Michael, please. In fact, we're 2 slides behind. I'm on slide number 3 now.
Keep going, John.
Okay, I can just keep going. I'm on slide number 3. Why there's two pictures on slide number 3. One is for regular friendship group reunions and leaders group reunions. So why friendship group reunions? Mother Teresa in 1996 made this statement: because we are meant, called to satiate the thirst of Jesus. And this thirst was first revealed to us from the cross. We cannot know or satiate the thirst of Jesus if we do not know, love, and live the cross of Jesus. We must be united with Jesus in our suffering, with our hearts full of love for the Father and love for the souls as his was. The weekly reunions hold us accountable to ourselves and to the members of our group as to how we are preparing ourselves through piety and study to serve others through actions lived out in our environments every day. Well, why? The next, no, this is fine, Mike, sorry. Why the leaders group reunion? I would say basically because the Spirit needs laborers. He needs disciples. He needs people that will help him satiate his thirst. Who will be his heart, his hands, his feet, or his arms? Is it I, Lord? For the Cursillo movement to flourish, we need some of our fellow Cursillistas to make this ministry one of the environments they serve, either as a primary ministry, full-time, or in smaller ways of service, part-time. Which brings us to the Leaders Group Reunion, which is designed to keep Cursillo movement foremost in our hearts and minds, forming us to be effective and consistent disciples in supporting the Cursillo movement enough, laboring for Jesus, hopefully satiating his thirst to some degree. Slide number 4. Friendship is the bedrock of Cursillo. Make a friend, be a friend, bring your friend to Christ. This reunion helps us increase our knowledge, especially our depth of understanding, and hone our skill sets for our discipleship. As friends, we encourage and support each other. As Mother Teresa said in 1993, until you can hear Jesus in the silence of your own heart, you will not be able to hear him saying, I thirst in the hearts of the poor. Not only that he loves you, even more, Jesus longs for you. He misses you when you don't come close. He thirsts for you, even when you don't feel worthy. Jesus needs laborers. His thirst needs to be satiated. Slide number 5. The Leaders Reunion helps us set the stage for our discipleship to bear fruit in a specific environment. Cursillo may not be the best boot camp for evangelization, but there's none better. Mother Teresa said in 1993, how to approach the thirst of Jesus. Only one secret. The closer you come to Jesus, the better you will know his thirst. Jesus needs laborers. His thirst needs to be satiated. Slide number 6. The Friendship Group Reunion is used by all Cursillistas in their 4th day because they are friends. Sadly, I believe that this is one of the least used 4th day events or programs for us in the Cursillo. I know so many Cursillistas that are not in Friendship Group Reunion. This is something that we need to change, because the original intent of Eduardo Bodine was to have crucios so that we could have friendship group reunions. They make us better Christians. They make us more effective and more complete as Christian leaders. The Leaders Group reunion is used by cruciistas who attend the School of Leaders, who want the advancement of the Crucio movement and evangelization of environments. And I would suggest that anybody who is providing any service within this ministry should participate in a Leaders Group reunion. Find a way to participate in a Leaders Group reunion. Because even if you're only sponsoring or a prayer warrior, and I say only, those are very important, the reality is the Leaders Group reunion helps us to learn more about this ministry so that we can serve it properly. The next slide, please. On the left side, you see the friendship group reunion sheet, and on the right, you see the Leaders Group reunion sheet. The left focuses us on becoming, being, and living our discipleship. It's very important because it helps to determine not only the quality, but the effectiveness of our discipleship. With respect to the Leaders Group reunion, it focuses on a specific environment with a specific game plan, targeted discipleship. Next slide, please. Slide number 8. As we talk about piety with respect to the friendship group reunion, the piety question is really asking us to evaluate on a weekly basis how effective our acts of piety are. In my relationship with Christ, is my relationship with Christ growing and becoming more intimate, deeper? Am I falling more deeply in love with Him? If my acts of piety are not causing the changes to occur that are needed within me, why should I be doing it? On the right side, with the Leaders Group reunion, which is affected by the friendship group reunion, our personal relationship with Jesus definitely affects our desires and our motivations to serve Him in the ministry of Crucio. Next slide, please. Study. When the friendship group reunion, study deepens my understanding and knowledge of Jesus. To know Him is to love Him. When you think about it, it's difficult to love someone that you can't see, touch, or feel, or give a hug to. Our only way to come to know Him is through each other and through our studies. To know Him is to love Him. I haven't, in my own personal life, I see the difference in my own relationship with Sandy. My love for my wife is different today than it was 56 years ago. It's richer, it's deeper, it's comfortable. On the Leaders Group reunion side, study deepens our knowledge and understanding of the ministry of Crucio. We can learn how the movement was intended to be passed on, the way the Holy Spirit intended it to be. In the Leader's Manual, I think it's on page 46, it says, the worst enemies of a movement are those who promote it without understanding it. Slide number 10. These are about planning. specifically particularly on the leaders group reunion side. But it asks us, what apostolic actions have taken place in my personal environments, family, work, church, social, as a result of my piety and study, including study of my environments. It was not too long ago that I really began to appreciate the environments royal on Sunday morning. It wasn't that long ago that it occurred to me that I need to spend more time looking at specific environments within my personal space. I need to do more of that. Focusing on who are potential candidates, who can I potentially sponsor, a variety of things that I could be more directed on. On the leader side, it's really more about developing a strategic plan honed in on serving both the 3-day and the 4th-day communities. Slide number 11. So I find in my own life that actions on the friendship side tend to be more spontaneous and situational. I respond to what is happening in front of me rather than planning out specific things, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. The leader side, my activities tend to be more planned and executed, although not always. Here's what we have to remember about why we do these reunions. Jesus needs laborers, disciples. His thirst needs to be satiated. Take the Lord's.